All right, let's go over very quickly what I saw on the test last year. First of all, how many of you are new? Never been to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this means nothing to you this year, but usually what we do is kind of give you a quick overview. Last year, we introduced basal area. We are going to continue the next step with basal area today and also introduce the concept of stalking. It's not that difficult, but it's something that I know has been on many national tests, so we've been taking baby steps and bringing you in. If you are new, you will be looking at a little piece of glass. And you'll go, why do I have a little piece of glass? This is a technical instrument. And these instruments, if you've ever heard of rule of thumb, forestry is all about rules of thumb. This is 1 inch. This is 6 inches. This is 6 inches. This is 9 inches. We have tons of rules of thumb. So over the years, some equipment has been made for foresters using rules of thumb. From here to my eye, 25 inches. That's what your Biltmore stick is set up for. 25 inches from your eye. If you aren't 25 inches, some of you guys, you got these really long arms, some girls too, you need to check and make sure from your eye to where you're holding that stick, it's 25 inches. If you're at 27-inch length, your stick's going to be off, because that stick is geared for 25 inches. Okay? What's this thing? Yep, it's a tape measure, but it's actually specific. This is a diameter tape. One of the common mistakes I see, people use the wrong side of it. We had like a 16-inch tree last year. I knew the ones that messed up and had the wrong side because they had 60 inches in DBH. No, so there's an inch side on this side and a DBH on that side. What does 1 inch DBH, what are you using? What's the formula? Anybody know? Pi, which is what? 3.14 r squared. Pi r squared. No, now a lot of people don't know that. So that's the reason, that's all the D-tape is. It's pi r squared already done for you. If you mess it up and do the inch side, what would you do? Divide by pi, okay? It's very basic mathematics. All right, the other thing, diameters were pretty good. Your basal areas were spot on. Was a tree in? Was it out? Remember when we talked about in and out? If you are looking through a prism, and this is your Pizza Hut tree, okay? If you are looking through a prism and you are over the plot center, because that prism is over the plot center. You are not over the plot center. The prism is. If you are looking through that prism and your tree looks like this is an in tree. You would measure that. That's what we're going to do today. If you're looking through a prism and you have this, is that tree in or out? It's in. These two are touching. If you have this, in or out? Out. They are not touching. And then you have this. What's that? Borderline. So, usually in a situation like that, if you have a borderline tree, let's say you have 2 or 3, you only count every other one when you're doing the actual measuring. So today, like I said, your ins and outs were spot on. We're just going to add a couple little things to it that if you go national, this is what you'll see. Remember, if you go to Canada, you will also see metric.
That means they'll see hectares too.
Hectare.
Instead of acres.
Yeah, hectare.
I didn't think of that.
I did.
Will you give them a chart and stuff?
Actually, it's funny you should ask that, Susan. We are going to go through a really quick exercise. Some other things, your topo maps were good. Most of it, tree heights. Yeah, no. Tree heights still had some issues with it. Your tree ID, there was a lot of issues with tree ID. So here's what I usually tell people. Oh, okay. So for tree heights, and sometimes it's the concept, we can pass it around because there's two good examples out there. There's none with the decay. So when we are looking at tree heights, we are looking for three things, and this just makes it easier. If you are in the real world of forestry, yeah, I can take branches and stems and make wood out of them, but for this competition, we are looking for these three things. We're going to cut it off either at an 8-inch top. That means that tree just goes up, 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 up. You may have branches, but if those branches are not over half the diameter of that tree, we just keep on going. Okay, so we've got a bunch of poplars out here. They love to grow straight up, not many big branches. Then we have another one, a major fork. A major fork means if I'm the tree, let's say I've got, here's Jim's tube. I'm the tree. Here's my diameter. I heard that. Now he's missing. He saw the tube. All right. If I am the tree and you've done the diameter on me, let's say I'm 18 inches. Now you're looking for the height. And you go up and I've got a stem like this. Is this half of 18 inches? No, it's not. Would my arm be half of 18 inches? No. Now, if I get up there to the top, and all of a sudden there are two big forks, two limbs that are going off the side, this is probably where I'm going to go. I'm going to cut off at a major fork. The other thing that we're looking for, what did I do with my...
Right there.
Oh, next to the snake.
Yeah.
The other thing which, how do I say this? A major defect. Sometimes you will see a tree, let's say a scarlet oak. A scarlet oak naturally prunes its own branches. So you may have like a little hole here. Again, I'm the tree. If I've got a little hole right here where my patch is that over half the diameter of my total diameter? No. Because it's probably only going, the decay is only probably going to be like right about here. It's not going to be very deep. If you have a big hole, like this, in my tree, is that over half of the diameter of my tree? Yes. Because what you're seeing on the outside is probably going way down here on the inside. That's the reason we would cut it off at that major defect, okay? There is a lightning strike tree out here, but if it was that, we wouldn't even pick it. So we are looking for that 8-inch top. Think of a paint can up there, paint can at the top. A major fork and major decay, or major defect, I'm sorry.
Maybe a branch is broken off or something.
It better be a big branch.
Big branch.
Yeah, big branch.
Big branch. Over half of my diameter, half that tree's diameter. So if you measure a tree and it's a 20-inch tree and you've got a hole about that big, yeah, no. Okay? So those are the things we're looking for. So for the new people, we've got some examples out here. But one of the things we want to go over, we talked about basal area. Basal area is using the prism. Okay? And what we're going to do, let's see, where's Amber? You already passed them out? Okay. Each one of you has a clipboard. We're doing it about one per group.
Yeah.
Do you all have one? Okay. So some of you, if you've ever dealt with the 4-H Forestry Invitational, this looks very familiar to you. We were looking at something really quick. So what we're going to do, if you look at...
Yeah. Page 1 should be a score sheet that looks like this here.
Yeah.
It just has what your tree number would be. You write down your species, your diameter, and your height. Right?
Don't look at points. This has nothing
Yeah,
to do.
don't
We were
worry about
looking
the
for
points.
something real quick, and this happened to work for us.
Right.
So what we're going to do is give you some examples of trees, their diameter, and the height. The next page back is a volume table.
That'd be this one.
Hopefully everybody has used a volume table. It's very easy.
You use these every year at the competition we
Yeah.
always have.
Diameters and tree heights, you put them together, wherever they meet, that's the volume. Okay? It's not too difficult. Then the last thing we're going to introduce, the very last half page, is something called a stocking chart. And so when we're talking about stocking, the most basic way we can think about it, if you go out to a forest and all the trees are really tight together, canopy's closed, it's kind of, you know, what's grown on the ground? Probably not much. That is something that we would probably consider overstocked. That means there's so many trees the light can't get through and nothing's coming up behind it. A well-stocked forest would be something where you've got trees, fairly good spacing. A lot of this is going to help determine what we're going to do with that forest, if we're going to do anything. Sometimes it may be leave it alone. Some may say, hey, we may need to do some kind of harvest or some kind of management technique to it. So that's what a lot of stocking's for. And then understocked is you've got a tree over here and a tree over there. They're really small. They're not doing anything. So if it's understocked, it needs time to grow. Okay? Does that make sense? That's as basic as I can make it without formulas like that. So Johnny's going to talk about this a little more. Let's see, your invasive species were good. I did have some very funky names on a few of them, but you know, that's just the kids. Topo maps were really good, but tree ID, tree heights, biggest problem I see.
I think when it comes to the tree heights, I think your kids are overthinking it.
Yeah.
Because we all discuss it when we're out there. And if it's not a completely obvious, you know, major fork, major defect, then we're not going to use that tree. We're going for obvious, good answers. I think a lot of times what they do is they don't go to that first major fork with 50% diameter. They go to the second major fork because they second guess it. It's that simple. So when you're practicing with your kids, start off with, obvious answers, then move up to more complicated. Remember, we don't do sweep, and it's got to be a major defect or a major fork.
Right.
And we're going to cut it off at obvious spots. So I think they just overthink it.
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of it.
So yeah, practice on those. What kind of trees are they? Remember where you're going. You know, if this was up at Spruce Knob, you're probably not going to see a ton of oak sitting up there, but we're not at Spruce Knob, we're at Cacapan. So what kind of trees? It doesn't mean that we can't bring in some samples and have you go through them. The other thing, slope. Yeah, there was a real disconnect. Some did it really well, some just, I don't know where you came up with these answers. But anyway, you have to use that little tool. So when people come up to me and say, is that a clinometer? I start sweating because it's a clinometer. And if you haven't used it, or especially when kids say, this is the first time we've seen it. Okay, so use a clinometer.
All right, so we're just going to start off. We're just going to do some examples here, right? So I want everybody to look at your first page that I've got on your clipboard there. Now you can see it has tree numbers down through there. We're just going to do like the first three, tree 1, 2, and 3, all right? And it has your species. So let's just say for tree number 1, we've got a white oak. So write white oak for tree number 1.
I got a pen.
And of course you're going to do this as a group. So it says DBH. What does DBH stand for? And where is DBH? How high? 4.5 feet, right? Yeah. So it'd be 4.5 feet. Remember, that's our Forestry standard, right? DBH. Yeah. We'll go over it again out there. So when you use the D tape, so let me grab one here. So when you use the diameter tape, what this does is this gives me the diameter of the tree. But when you're dealing with subjects like forestry, it's a technical science, right? Well, if I was measuring way down here, I'd come up with a different answer than the fellow that was measuring up here. So we all need to measure at the same spot. We need to be on the uphill side of the tree. We need to make sure we throw the D-tape around and that we're measuring at 4.5 feet. You notice I keep pointing right here? You can have fun little lessons. You teach the kids where 4.5 feet is on that, right? So every time we measure trees, we measure them at DBH, diameter at breast height, right? So the DBH for tree number 1, let's just say it's 16 inches. So 16 is a really common saw log. That would be the kind of tree that I would harvest, right? So we've got a white oak, 16-inch diameter for DBH. And my height, let's make it 2.5 logs, right? So 2.5. When we measure logs, we do 16-foot logs, right? So one log is 16 foot high. A half log then is 8, right? 8 feet high. We do not go over 4 logs, right? We may have trees that go over 4 logs,
Yeah.
but we do not count anything over 4. So if your students measure a 5-log tree, a 4.5 log tree, the answer is 4. Now I'll say this, they don't often listen to us.
No, there's
When we
always
tell them
somebody tries to
that, they
make
do not listen. We tell them right before the test. I tell them all the rules, and I tell them anything over 4, that's
Here's
it.
why. So on this stick, it goes up to 5 logs, and this stick goes up to 6 logs. Okay? Sometimes people make their own sticks, and usually they only go up to 4 logs. So we will take it up to 4. Somebody will say, well, I know it's more than 4. What did we say? Take it to 4 logs every year. There's somebody who puts it 6, 7.5. It's like, oh dear. Okay.
And for the new participants in the room, when we go out in the field, if you want to practice that, we can practice getting your tree heights and getting your diameters. For now, I just want to make sure with the time that we have that we can go over this new material as well. All right? So for now, so we've got our first tree is a white oak. Diameter is 16 inches, and our tree height is 2.5 logs, right?
So what's our volume?
Yeah, so what's our next column say? It says volume, right? So let's go over to our volume table. Who all has never used a volume table before? Go ahead, a couple of you. All right, the way this works is just like a multiplication table, right? So along the top has my number of logs, right? So how many logs did I say I had? 2.5. Along the side it has diameter. What was my diameter? 16. So you just match those up, and what do I come up with? 210, right? So go back to your first page. Your volume of tree 1 is 210.
210 board feet.
Right, 210 board foot.
And what's a board foot? What?
Yeah.
12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch thick. That is a board foot. 12 by 12 by 1, or 144 square inches.
Yes.
Cubic
So-
inches.
Cubic?
Or you use
Because
three
it's
measurements.
volume.
12 by 12 by 1, so it's inches, 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 so it's cubic inches.
Okay. So let's do a couple more of these. So let's say my next tree's let's say a red oak. So your species for number 2 is going to be a red oak. Let's say it's 20 inches in diameter, and let's say it has 3.5 logs. So what's my volume going to be? Red oak, 20 inches, 3.5 logs. 440. Very good. So your volume on tree 2 is going to be 440. All right, let's pick another one. So let's say I've got an 18-inch walnut. It's a nice sale we're having here. So I have a black walnut, 18 inches. And let's say it has 3 logs. So what's my volume there? Nice walnut. Yeah, 314. Good. So now we've got our trees, right? We've got all 3 of our trees that we've sampled. We've got our species. We've got our diameters. We've got our heights and our volumes. So what we'll do now is we'll add up our volumes, right? So add up 210. What was it? It's 440. And then, yeah. So add all those up. See what you come up with. And you're going to put that down at the bottom where it says plot your plot volume. Let me edit that myself.
You didn't give us our plot size.
No, we're gonna
No,
get
we
to it.
haven't.
Don't get ahead of us.
Yep,
Sorry.
Don't get ahead of us.
it's
We'll
coming
get there.
I'm
next.
so excited, I actually know what we're doing.
Yeah, so we have to build up knowledge, So what'd you guys come up with?
964.
964. Gretchen, do you guys come up with the same thing?
We're working on it.
Working on
We
it?
need some more.
What'd you guys come up with, Upshur?
964.
964. Okay, 964. 964. All right. So if you look down there, it says total board foot volume in your plot. Now, as a forester, when I go through and I'm measuring timber and I'm coming up with these estimates, I can't go through and measure every single tree in the woods, right? It would take me forever. So what we commonly do is we'll take sample plots. Sample plots are very important because it saves us a lot more time, and we can get samples of that forest to make our evaluations and decide what our techniques are going to be. So if I had a plot size, and plot size can vary. They can be 1/10 of an acre, they could be 1/4 of an acre, they could be 1/2 acre. All right, you can have variable plot sizes. And they're not always a perfect circle. Sometimes it can be an oval, they could be a square. It all depends on what techniques and what system that we're using. So let's say in this instance, I'm using a 1/10 acre plot. And at the bottom left of your paper, it says plot size. I want everybody to write down 1/10 acre. 1/10 acre plot. All right, that's going to be your plot size. Does everybody understand that so far? Okay. So if my plot sample was 1/10 of an acre, and I want to figure out how many trees I had or what my volume would be for a full acre, what would I do? I'd multiply by 10, right? So let's say I had a 1/4 acre plot, what would I do? I'd multiply by 4. Right, good job. If I had a 1/2 acre plot, what would I do? Multiply by 2. He's confused.
Oh,
over there.
that's okay. I was thinking like half.
He got excited. I was throwing out numbers.
1/2 of 10, don't overthink it.
All right. So what was our volume earlier you came up with?
964.
964. So if I multiply that by
Oh, yeah, that's
10 for a 1/10 acre plot, what would I get?
966.
Right. So you get 9,600 or whatever you came up with. So your total board foot volume per acre would go right here. You see that? So go ahead and write that in. So if that was per acre, let's say I had 100 acres. Then what would I do? And then I would multiply, right? So that's all this is. This is how it works. When we were discussing with you, and everyone's done good so far with learning basal area. Remember, basal area, we'll scoop the snakes again. When it comes to basal area, it's that cross-sectional area that the tree takes up, right? Well, you learned that the first time we went over this 3 years ago or so. Last year, we taught you how to decide using the prism, which tells you the basal area, right? Basal area prism. See, some of you that's new, you haven't seen one of these yet, but it's just a little wedged piece of glass. And when I look through that, it's the same as what Linda was teaching you a moment ago. It tells you if a tree is in, out, or borderline. Right? So, yeah, in, out, and borderline. Now here's the new lesson. I've taught you something new. We've always measured trees, we've always come up with volume. But here's the difference. Now when we measure with our prism, and we have actual sample plots, I only want you to give me the volumes of the trees that are in trees. See how that works? If I gave you 5 trees, and 2 were out trees, well, I don't want you to count those. I only want you to count the in trees within my sample plot. You see how we're building your knowledge? As you go, it's going to be more and more technical skills. And we're going to practice that outside, so don't worry. The only thing we have left to go over in here, we definitely need to go over, is the stalking methods. So, let's say I had a 1/10 acre plot, all right? And in that, I had 5 trees, right? So if I want to figure out how many trees I had per acre, what would I do? Multiply by 10. So if I had 5 trees in my 1/10 acre plot, and I multiply by 10, how many trees do I have per acre?
50.
I have 50, right? So let's look at our stalking sheet. I've got one here somewhere. I did.
It's over on the table.
Oh, I was like, did I not grab it? Thank you. All right, so go to your stalking sheet. This was the half piece paper on the back side. So it works just like the multiplication table. Everybody listen closely? All right. Works just like the multiplication table. On one part here it says trees per acre. How many trees per acre did I say? 50. So find 50. And then our average DBH. So we had a 16-inch tree, an 18-inch tree, and a 20-inch tree. What would our average be? 18. So when you cross those, what do you come up with? Which one of these little scaled areas are we in? We're in well stocked. So is that a pretty healthy forest? Is there too much competition? No. Is there enough trees per acre? Yes. Now if I would come up with something like 50 trees per acre, but they were only 12 inches in diameter, where would I be? Understocked. Good. And if I had 150 trees per acre, and they were 20 inches in diameter, where would I be? I'd be overstocked. Then I would need to prescribe a harvest, a thinning, silvicultural practices. Does that make sense? All this is reading a table.
Yep.
It's that simple. Your kids will overthink this. It's reading a table. If they can read the volume table, they can read the stocking table. All right? So.
The ins and outs, what's the significance of that? It tells you what type of wood, like if you're looking for a hardwood or a softwood or something
No,
dark or...
it's all about
volume.
sampling.
Yeah.
So it's the volume of the trees. What the
Yeah,
business is.
it's like, well, you'll see when we get out there. So we're looking at a little plot size. And like he said, we can't go around measuring each and every tree. We don't have time to do that. So that prism is set up through a formula, and we can look at that, and it tells us which trees to measure in our plot. We only measure those, and that is a sample.
So you only measure the ends.
Yeah, yeah, you only measure the ends. If it's an out tree, next, move on. So usually what we do, if you're in a circle, wherever you are, and here's the plot center, you're going around the plot center, and you are looking all the way around until you come back to the tree you started with. And you see how many we're in. It's usually good if you have somebody extra going one,
Oh, yeah.
and send them over, and they start measuring it. If it's out, we don't need it. We're only looking for the ends.
What it really comes down to, it's all about that plot sampling method. And I'm looking for, when I'm dealing with basal area, we're talking about stalking, and I'm not going to get in the weeds.
Yeah,
I'm
we're trying not
gonna
to
do
get too.
But really what it's doing, it's telling me which trees I need to measure so that I understand what my stalking and my density and all those things are. I'm not worried about that little tiny tree in front of me, right? My prism's going to say it's out. That really big tree that's way outside my plot size, I'm not worried about it. It's going to tell me it's out. It's going to tell me which trees not to waste my time on.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
a
it really
shortcut so that you don't have to go around with this thing and measure each one of those.
Yeah.
That prism, that piece of glass is doing it for you.
Is there a certain amount away from the trees that you need to be that?
But
No,
there's different ways to go about it. When you're dealing with plot sampling and using a prism, the prism's deciding that for you. Now, in the competition, and these examples were given, we're going to give you a plot size.
Yeah.
Now, out here as an example, I have a 10th acre plot flagged out. We may not do that in the competition. We may just tell the kids, imagine this is a 1/4 acre plot.
Yeah.
When I give them everything, I'm going to say, write down 1/4 acre plot on your sheet. All right?
Because there is actually a certain size, a perfect size, but in the real world, sometimes you don't have time to go lay out 37.5 feet from plot center on both sides so that you can measure all the trees inside. That prism took care of it for you.
Yeah. The prism really comes down to the basal area, and that's where we're getting the weeds.
Yeah.
If we're not careful, we'll go above scientifically than where you need to be.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. We will give them a plot size, and within the area that we flag off for them or we determine, the tree numbers that we determine, they'll just choose amongst them.
And we could have another column in there that says tree 1, species, in or out, borderline. diameter, so you're doing everything right there, okay?
But I think that's it for the inside portion. Let's get outside. What time we have time?